What's going on, folks? Back at it with another episode of GW Recap. I'm your host, Cardell Dudley, and as you can see, George Washington with a convincing win, pulling away in the second half over Old Dominion, 96-73. Rafael Castro had his way throughout the night, finished with 20 points, 9 rebounds, and three steals. Gary Johnson came off the bench with 17 points and 5 rebounds. And Gene Arangering, apologies for butchering your name, 17 points and 3 rebounds. Old Dominion was led by Robert Davis Jr. and Ketron Shaw. I want to make sure I get his name right. Ketron Shaw, who both finished with 14 points. And Scotty Hubbard added 8 points and 7 rebounds. The first half, the final score isn't really, reflective of what went down in the first half. The first half, it was much closer. Both teams kind of started out as with a defensive slugfest, so to speak. For those that don't know, Old Dominion came into tonight's game one of the best defensive teams in the country. They only gave up 65 points a game, which is 87th out of 365 D1 teams. Their defensive rating is a 94.2, which is in a ranks them 112th in Division One. So they came in with a pretty good defensive profile. Ketron Shaw and L.J. Thomas both came in averaging 16.3 points. Jordan Battle added 9. And, they got they're a lot deeper than they were last year. And this is with Robert Davis, who's their leading scorer last year. Just kind of getting back in the flow of things, as the season has progressed. So, coming in, you didn't quite know what to expect, so to speak, as far as, how GW would deal with kind of a team that gets after defensively. And would GW be able to be patient enough to find the cracks and, in their defense to be able to make plays while maintaining the offensive efficiency that they needed to pull out this game. And then the first half, they struggled with it. The Old Dominion came out, with a 7-0 run, and they held a 9-6 lead with about 15:53 left in the first half, man. And Caputo had to call a timeout to help them regroup, and to help them regroup and get things back in order. For the most part, GW was getting good looks. They just weren't falling. But as usual, GW responded with a run. They responded with a 6-0 run, and held ODU scoreless for over 2 minutes, which helped them get a 16-14 lead. With 11:40 left in the first half. Then Rafael Castro, he imposed his will, and his performance, his final stats isn't, again, reflect on how dominant, how impactful he was to the overall scheme of how GW pulled away. I'll break that down later in depth at the end of the show. But Castro, he got out to a blazing start. He had 11 points and 4 shooting from the field, along with 5 rebounds, pretty much midway through the first half. Now, Robert Davis Jr., again, their leading scorer from last year, he responded with back-to-back three-pointers to bring ODU within 28-26 at the 5:22 mark. At that point, he had 9 points of 3 or 4 from deep. He was hot, and GW needed to do something real quick about him because he seemed primed to try to, propel ODU and try to build that lead. And GW responded, man. They clamped down on everybody. After ODU kind of fizzled out with a run with about 4:24 left, and them holding a 30-28 lead after a Jordan battle three. GW responded on both sides of the ball, but it started with the defense. They clamped down on ODU. They finished the half shooting 6 of 7 from the half, and 6 or 7 from the field to end the half. And ODU only shot 1 for 4. So that gap with their defense allowed them to take a 44-41 lead in the half. After a Trey Dinkins, finish inside, tough hanging layup that he scored to give them a 3-point lead instead of a 1-point lead at the half. Orangutan, who I'm going to talk about in depth in a little bit, had 12 points and 3 rebounds. Castro, again, 11.6 rebounds at the half, and Dinkins had 7. Robert Davis led ODU with 9. Thomas had 7 points and 4 rebounds. And Jared Turner had 6 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists. For those who know, Jared Turner is a local kid, played in Gonzaga under legendary coach Steve Turner, who's now, down Florida. So when Marbury, son, was putting in work in the first half, and that shows you how competitive the first half was. And that, again, the defense of ODU, they kind of confused GW and spurts where they hung around at the half, man. Again, before I get to the second half of Orangutan, he's a pest defensively. He usually is appointed the assignment of dealing with the opposing team's toughest guard, most shifty guard. Whoever, kind of orchestrates things, he's usually the guy that get the call to just make life miserable for him. And, in the first half, when GW got the spark to close out the half, he was a big part of that defensively, forcing turnovers, getting deflections, forcing tough shots, getting timely rebounds and scoring. He killed them, just cutting back door, just moving without the ball. He killed ODU. ODU was standing watching the ball, watching other guys, Christian, and obviously with Rafael, what he was doing with Castro, what he was doing, how he was scoring, running the floor, rolling to the basket hard, and all that. He drew a lot of attention. Dinkins was hitting shots. Orangutan simply just cut behind the defender that was on him, that fell asleep for a split second. They found him, and he was scoring that well, man. So. He did his thing, and I also think he did an excellent job as well as being a secondary ball handler, orchestrating things when Christian Jones got trapped or pressured. Dinkins as well. He was kind of the release for all those guys to, keep the flow and try to build a rhythm and a flow offensively for GW. Now, that was the first half. The second half, he got ugly quick. George Washington started the second half with a 13-3 run to take a 57-44 lead at just on the 16-minute mark. They built it out to a 22-6 run at the 13-14 mark after Gary Johnson three-pointer, and ODU simply just never recovered. That's the best way I can. That's just the best way I can honestly put it, man. And GW outscored a 52-32 in the second half. Held on to 32% shooting from the field, 25% shooting from deep. They just really clamped down. They really just clamped down on GW something serious, man. I mean, on ODU something serious. ODU shot 58% from deep in the first half, shot 25% in the second half. But meanwhile, GW, 52 points. They shot 56% from the field, 40% from deep. Missed a few free throws I'm sure they would like to have back. But other than that, man, they were on point. They were on point in the second half, especially from three-point range. In the first half, GW shot 16% from deep, and then they responded with that 40% performance in the second half, and that was it. You know what I mean? Like, just flat out dominated, overwhelmed those guys at ODU. Boo Boo Benjamin was huge in the second half. With timely shooting. Gary Johnson got going. Um, the floodgates just really just open for GW, and there was absolutely nothing ODU can do. Just to put more emphasis, I said I would touch on it at the end of the show. Rafael Castro, yes, he had 20 points, but overall, because of him rolling to the basket and drawing so much attention and setting screens and the fear of him rolling and catching lobs and whatnot, GW outscored ODU points in the paint 44-18. They had 23 points off of ODU's 16 turnovers. Meanwhile, only giving up 5 points off of their turnovers, which was 6. They didn't turn the ball over hardly at all, which is incredible, man. Christian Jones only had one. Again, Arangaran, he didn't have any. Half of the turnovers came from Dinkins, and he only had 3. That just shows you how efficient the guard play was for GW, man. And that's another reason why, it was just tough for them to stop, because even with that pressure that ODU was trying to inflict on them, it didn't bother GW. They still managed. Again, they says it, in the first half, they just had to get a rhythm and get good shots to see the ball go in the basket. But once the ball started going in the basket, it was really nothing ODU could do. And then, those were the biggest gaps. Fast break points, 28. Those were the biggest reasons why GW pulled away in the second half, on top of not giving ODU extra possessions with turnovers and, being pretty efficient throughout the game, outside of, the first half of 3-point range where they shot 60%. They finished the game with 27%, but, the second half, like I said, they shot 40%. For the game, they shot 49% from the field, and they shot a respectable 71% overall as a team. You know what I mean? So it was just, the clinic, man. They were balanced scoring. As we, as I stated before, to get that type of production from your reserves where they scored 44 of your 96 points, pretty much half of your points, that's just, any coach would take that. And this is just a reflection of, again, how deep this year's GW team is. And not just that, how versatile they are, and honestly, how talented they are. We know Caputo's an excellent coach. You know what I mean? He got an excellent staff. They've been together for some years. But with that being said, you still got to put it together when it matters most, and when the lights are on, and they're putting it together. That's why they're now 4-0. At the convincing win over ODU. And I just like where they headed, man. They're playing well. They're gelling well. Guys are just fitting in their roles, not really caring about who gets what. You could tell the focus is just on winning, and they're doing it as by committee. So it's not a single player or a couple players you could just focus on, zero in on. They go about 8 or 9 deep, man. And keep in mind, they did this without a starting guard, Trey Autry, who didn't play. And, Ty Bevins, who's out, their sophomore wing, who's out with an injury. So, to be honest, they go 10 deep. And that's a luxury to have with Caputo, man. So, there's a reason why they were picked so high in the A-10 conference in the preseason. There's a reason why they're expected to do a lot of damage, and they're living up to the billing, man, being undefeated thus far, at 4-0, man. So, just a hell of a win, man. And the main thing with GW is can continue to just be consistent. And if they can continue to do that, obviously, especially consistent on defense and being consistent with not turning the ball over. That's something last year at times that played them. They have a good run and turnovers come, and then it deflates them. They can continue to be efficient in that area and then just execute on both ends, starting with their defense, with the depth they have and the versatility and the shooting, the mid-range shooting, the variety of ways they can score from the block, lob plays, transition, all types of backdoor cuts and sets and all that, man. If they can continue to do that, man, GW is gonna make a lot of noise this season, man. So, with that being said, I appreciate you guys for joining. Before I go, their next game, 4-0 GW, they will host 2-1 UMBC this upcoming Wednesday at 7 p.m. So, I want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of GW Recap. Again, George Washington pulls away in the second half over ODU, Old Dominion, 96-73. Thank you for joining me. I will be back with another episode of GW Recap soon. Take care and keep enjoying it, man. Keep supporting GW, man. They got something good building, man. And it's been fun to watch so far through the first 4 games of the season. Talk to you guys later.